back to the BBQ Pit MMA. We are coming to you live for UFC on ESPN 41 or UFC San Diego, whichever one you want to call it. It will be on ESPN. It will take place in San Diego, and the hometown kid, Dominick Cruz, headlines versus Marlon Vera. Vera currently on a 2-fight winning streak. Got a decision win in March and December of last year over Casey Kenny and Pedro Munoz. He took 4 years off after his title loss to Garbrandt in 2016, came back to an immediate title fight, lost to Henry Cejudo, and then now he's won 2 back-to-back. He is 24-3 in his career with 16 wins via decision, 7 wins via knockout. He's coming into this fight with a slight size disadvantage, and I would say a disadvantage on the ground grappling because he's a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, whereas Marlon Vera is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Vera currently on a 3-fight winning streak, defeating Davey Grant, Frankie Edgar, Rob Font. These guys both have 5 wins back-to-back with each other, 2 for Cruz, 3 for Vera. And Cruz has Casey Kenny, which is a young guy, up-and-comer, Pedro Munoz, who I think is retired now, so he was at the latter part of his career when he beat him. And then Marlon Vera's got win over Davey Grant, who's getting up there in age, Frankie Edgar, who I believe is retired now, and Rob Font, who's a young up-and-comer. So, how much value do you put in these wins here? Vera is 4-2 since 2020, with his only losses being against Song Yadong via decision, and then also another decision loss to Jose Aldo. He's never been finished in his professional career and has 8 wins via submission, 7 wins via knockout or technical knockout. 19-7-1 is his professional record, and he's been in the UFC since 2014, so he's a veteran of the UFC. He's got grit, good leg kicks. I'd say that's probably going to be the difference maker, man. Dominick Cruz relies a lot on his mobility and his footwork. If Marlon Vera could come out there early and land some good leg kicks and sort of make Dominick Cruz stationary instead of his crazy, wild movements that he normally does, I think Marlon Vera's got pretty much an easy path here to victory. I want to pull this up really quick because this is something I didn't do today. That one's pretty easy. My pick's Marlon Vera. Decision goes his way, I believe. Knockout goes his way, I believe. Submission goes his way, I believe. So I don't really see a way where Dominick Cruz gets it done unless he can just completely outclass Marlon Vera standing up. If he could just box him up, check the leg kicks and stay at range, beating him up, with a slight size disadvantage, that would be extremely impressive that he did that. And I would have, if he's going to win, that's how he's going to do it. I just don't see it happening. So I'm going to go Marlon Vera, who I was pulling up the odds, is the favorite. So co-main event, Nate Landwehr versus David Onama. Landwehr 15-4 with 8 wins via knockout, 2 out of 4 of his losses via knockout. He's 2-2 in the UFC, with his 2 losses being TKO losses to Herbert Burns and Julian Erosa. Herbert Burns predominantly a grappler, so I guess Landwehr more weary of the takedown aspect of it, got caught standing. And then Julian Erosa, who's got crazy amounts of height, crazy amounts of reach over Nate Landwehr. His 2 UFC wins include Darren Elkins, decision over Darren Elkins, and a submission win over Ludwig Klein in his last fight, October of 2021. He's a former M1 Global Featherweight champion, and he's got a 2-inch height and a 2-inch reach disadvantage coming into this fight with David Onama. David Onama is 10-1, with his only loss being a decision loss to Mason Jones in his UFC debut. He's 2-1 in the UFC. He's got back-to-back wins over Gabriel Benitez and Garrett Armfield. 100% finish rate, 6 wins via TKO, 4 wins via submission, and in his last 3 opponents leading up to the UFC, they had a combined record of 18-0, meaning, he's been in the UFC for 3 fights. Those 3 fights would make 6, so for 60%, or maybe a little under 50% of his fights professionally have had very good records. 3 of those guys, prior to getting into the UFC, he took their oath. He broke their undefeated streak. the guy's got world-class striking. I think that's what it comes down to. He is going to be the favorite coming into this weekend, but the world-class striking is just unmatched. It's not there's no easier way to put it than his striking is going to do more damage to Nate Landwehr than Nate Landwehr's striking. Now, Nate Landwehr has got crazy style, spin kicks, these choppy leg kicks that he does. He's just a warrior, man. He's down to go to war any day of the week. But I don't think that's going to be the approach to take against a guy like David Onama. And if he does, it's going to be a quick night. If he doesn't, I could see it kind of being drug out a little bit, and Nate and Onama kind of having to test his waters in the second and third round. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go David Onama via TKO is going to be my prediction. I'm going to flip over here. Devin Clark versus Amzmat Murzakanov. Azmat Murzakanov. Clark coming into this fight 13-6, 3-2 since 2020 with his two losses, including with his two losses being against Anthony Smith and Ion Cutelaba. He is 7-6 in the UFC with wins over guys like William Knight. That was his last win, his last fight. Alonzo Menefield, Darko Stosic, Mike Rodriguez, and Jake Collier. He is 8-1 via decision. Former NCAA Junior College All-American at South Dakota State University. And he's coming into this fight with a 1-inch height and a 4-inch reach advantage over Azmat, who is 11-0. He is undefeated, 1-0 in the UFC with a TKO win over Tefan Nuswichi in his UFC debut in March. He won his UFC contract on the Contender Series in 2021 with a knockout win over Matthias Schaffel, however you say his name, and also has a win over Andre Muniz prior to getting into the UFC, which is a big win, man. Muniz is coming into the UFC. He has shown over and over again that he is a UFC caliber middleweight, and Murakanov has a win over him prior to even getting to the big stage. I think if you look at the odds here, the odds line up perfectly. Azmat comes in as a slight favorite. You know, the grappling, I would say, is going to come in as kind of a wild card if Devin Clark can get him down and hold him down and get him tired. But, again, you know, going back to the Dominic Cruz fight, it's a bunch of ifs for him. But Murakanov has got a lot of get it done in his kind of way to victory, path to victory. So I'm going to go Azmat Murakanov. Gerald Meerschaert versus Bruno Silva. Gerald Meerschaert getting a lot of heat last week because he lost to, damn it, I don't even remember his name. Jay Perrion beat this guy who had fought like 100 times or something like that, and only had 16 wins. And that guy has a win over Gerald Meerschaert. But I clarified it really quick. Gerald Meerschaert was in his third professional fight at that time, where this guy who has this terrible record had already been fighting like 12, 13 times. So I know he hadn't had a lot of wins, but he had some wins, and he had a ton of losses. Either way, he had a shit ton of experience, and it shouldn't be a knock on Meerschaert, who is 34-15 in his career. So, I mean, he's not the greatest wins and losses wise, but, you know, he's a veteran of the sport, and he's got 26 wins via submission. 3-1 in his last 4 fights, losing a decision to Krzysztof Jotko in his last fight. He's 9-7 in the UFC with wins over Dustin Stolfus, Makhmud Muradov, and Darren Wynn and Trevin Giles. He's former RFA middleweight champion. Most submission wins in the UFC middleweight history with 8. Black belt in jiu-jitsu coming into this fight with a slight reach advantage. Excuse me, I'm boring my fucking self. Whereas Bruno Silva comes into this fight with a black belt. So pretty evenly matched on the ground. Bruno Silva is 22-7 with 19 wins via knockout. Never been knocked out in his pro career, and he is 0-5 via submission. Very, very interesting there because he is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, so he's got very high credentials as far as jiu-jitsu goes. I think the part that kind of plays into it is that most of his fighting prior to getting into the UFC took place on the regional scene in Brazil. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So, pretty much everybody out there is a black belt or a brown belt or some shit like that. So it's not far from from the possibility of thinking that he just fought guys that were that high class of grapplers, and that's why he's 0-5 in submissions. But it's just something to keep an eye on. He's a former M1 Global Middleweight Champion, 3-1 in the UFC, losing his most recent fight to a decision to Alex Pereira. He was the M1. He won his M1 Global Champion over Alexander Shemenko, who he knocked out for that title. And all three of his UFC wins will determine Andrew Sanchez and Jordan Wright, all knockout wins. Excuse me, I don't know what's going on with me tonight. It seems pretty easy to me again with that one. Bruno Silva probably going to get himself a knockout win. Just, same way that Hamzat did it. Pressure, unloading the hands, probably going to knock him out, I'd say, first round. Rest of the card plays out. These two fights are probably going to be on the main card. I just didn't preview them. Cynthia Calvillo versus Nina Nunes, and Yaman Jaragui versus Yisman Lucindo. Probably going to be on the main card, both of those. Angela Hill will be taking on Lupi Godinez. Martin Boudet going up against Lucas Brzezinski. Gabriel Benitez will be going up against Charlie Ontarrios. Yusuf Zalal going up against UFC newcomer Damon Blackshear. Shout out Damon Blackshear coming out of this the Carolinas. Ode Osborne taking on Tyson Nam, likely kicking off the card. So a lot to look forward to this weekend. Again, shout out Damon Blackshear, who's making his UFC debut this weekend. Did not mean to pause that. Sorry about that. But yeah, man, everybody stay barbecued. Until next Tuesday, you guys holler at me. You guys know what the fuck it is.